once again, welcome everyone, and thank you for registering and taking part to this Making Sustainability the Key to Your Business Prosperity. I think there is some kind of background. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. As you can see, it's slightly different from any webinar you've probably been to, because it is not a webinar at all. And that's why we've called it roundtable discussion. There was a bit of thinking around, should we do it as a webinar? Should we do it as a roundtable? And what does a roundtable even look like? As you can see, there is no table, but obviously that would have been a bit difficult on Zoom. But actually, one of the guests from today, Kirsty, she gave me this idea. She's a CSR colleague, and she gave me this incredible idea of, you know, sustainability people traditionally, they work in small teams, so they don't get a chance to be with each other all the time and to share ideas and learn from each other. So we thought, why not create this space? Why not create a space where people can share ideas and challenges and opportunities with colleagues that have gone through the same issues, have faced the same challenges, and ideally have solved these challenges and turned them into opportunities. So this is really a learning space, and I would encourage you all to take part in the discussion and share your thoughts on the chat. And also towards the end, when we come towards the end, just open your mics and ask any questions that you might have to the guest, or share any thoughts around the theme. Okay, so what I would like to do first is ask all our guests to just open their mics and 30-second introduction of themselves, so that you know who's on the, you know, who's kind of leading the discussion today. So Kirsty, do you wanna, since I mentioned you, do you wanna start? Thank you.
Sure, Alice. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsty Christie, and I'm the Corporate Citizenship Manager for FTI Consulting, which is a professional services firm, a global professional services firm. And my role is to support and empower our colleagues to give back through volunteering, fundraising, pro bono, and supporting environmental sustainability. Thanks, Alice.
Roy.
Hi everyone, my name is Roy Bidder, and I'm Head of Operations at Optimised Energy. We're part of the Optimised Group and are an energy and sustainability consultancy based here in the UK. I think I've been invited because we are a certified B Corp, and I'm going to be talking a bit later about environmental sustainability.
Nice, thank you, Roy. Richard.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Collins. I'm the founder of CSR-Accreditation, the UK's only accreditation body for social responsibility, although we do operate now on a global stage. I'm interested in introducing a new standard for social responsibility that changes the definition to create an inclusive C, to allow social responsibility to be available for all organisations, so not just corporate. So we look at charitable social responsibility, community social responsibility, and most importantly, a sense of collective social responsibility that gives access to all of us to deliver on our social responsibility as individuals. So I'll be talking a little bit later about the importance of sustainability for the SME market.
Thank you, Rich. Natalie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, so my name is Natalie. My career has taken me through roles in the charity sector, working in philanthropy and corporate social responsibility, to what I do today, which is mainly focused on supporting impact-driven startups to make social impact really the core of what they do as business, so that they grow with that impact, and helping them to understand where impact measurement fits within that. So I'm going to hopefully share some insights on impact measurement today.
Thanks, Natalie. Al.
Hi everybody, so my name's Al Higginbottom. I work for Salesforce, and I manage our employee volunteerism program in the UK, but also lead a program of workshops we're delivering for young people around the world to help them prepare for the opportunities of the future. And that's me.
Thank you, thanks. And last but not least, Ramona.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. I actually am with Berlin. I'm based in Berlin, but with a European-based finance advisory group called Roots of Impact. And what we basically do is something very simple, but hopefully profound, which is to find ways to finance value-creating social enterprises in a way that conventional investors do not, by the use of public money. And we do that by basically paying these enterprises or incentivizing them on the value that they create, for example, social or environmental value. So I'll speak more about that later, but a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And as you can see, I'm very excited to have all these incredible people joining us on the as guests, but also all of you who've joined us as an audience to take part in the conversation. So just a quick introduction to what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, as hopefully you all know by now, the main topic of today's discussion is how we can leverage sustainability to become the key to business prosperity. I want to specify and just give an introduction around what we mean by sustainability. When talking about sustainability today, we will be referring to the different aspects of sustainability and using the 3 Ps of sustainability to define it. So the first one is people. So talking about the social side of sustainability. The second one, the second P is planet. So obviously talking about the environmental side of sustainability. And finally, the third one is the one of prosperity, which is the notion of generating economic value as well for the communities in which we live and work as businesses and organizations. So without further ado, I would like to kick off the conversation with Richard. And I'd like to ask you, Richard, for a very long time, we've been aware that sustainability and social responsibility have traditionally been associated with large enterprises. That's something that was for the big corporations. It was called corporate social responsibility for a reason. So what I'd like to ask you, Rich, is why should small and medium-sized companies make sustainability and social responsibility key to their business? Is there a business case for them as well? You're on mute.
Thank you for reminding me.
No problem.
Thank you for the question, and I appreciate your definition in terms of explaining what sustainability means, because we take a holistic approach to sustainability, defined against those 4 pillars of workplace, environment, community, and philanthropy, that I think maps nicely against those 3 Ps. And the nice thing about those pillars and that inclusive C that I touched on earlier, so allowing social responsibility to be for all of us, because I believe that social responsibility allows you to enrich the quality of lives for all by allowing social value to be part of the job description, to be part of the business practice, an integral part of business. And I actually think the importance of the SME market is that the SMEs by definition are more entrepreneurial and far more flexible. They tend to have a better ability to deliver social responsibility than in fact the corporates do, which tend to be a little bit more rigid and departmented. But the 4 pillars really are a really great way for small and medium-sized businesses to look at what they're doing against the environment, against the workplace, against philanthropy in the community. So what we try and encourage is an organisation to identify what it's doing now, and then pull it together and communicate it to show leadership and to show that they are behaving as a responsible business. And I think the importance of this is a very strong business kind of reason. There's a very strong bottom line reason. I'm constantly talking about the fact that I think social responsibility is the new profit center for business. And in fact, the future shape of business will be measured as much in social value as it will be in financial value. So when I talk to organizations about, the drivers and the reasons to engage with social responsibility, it's not just about building that sustainable and profitable future. It's not just about resilience, and it's not just about building social responsibility as a recovery program as we come out of COVID. All of those things are important. but it's about engaging the staff in a way that addresses purpose and value. And I think we can see that there's a new generation coming out of universities, coming out of schools, you know, a new talent pool that have a very different idea about the sort of world that they want to work in and that they want to be part of. So I think, you know, it's really important to drive engagement. According to that Gallup poll in 2019, the UK showed only 11% were engaged in their jobs. And in fact, one of the biggest drivers to create engagement within the workplace was through purpose and value. So I think it's engaging the staff to drive that productivity, to drive that mental health and well-being agenda. It's about engaging staff to retain staff, so you're reducing your training costs and learning costs, and it's about attracting talent into an organization where they see that value and purpose, and where you can enrich the quality of those individuals' lives by allowing them to deliver that social responsibility piece. And that comes back to that inclusivity, allowing decision making throughout the business and workplace. The autonomy to say, look, I want my business to be more engaged with the community. I want my business to be more engaged with regards to its impact on the planet. And I want my business to be more engaged in looking after us, the staff, in that mental health and well-being, that diversity inclusion, that training and ethical procurement and so on and so forth. But of course, other factors that I'm sure will be touched on later on, especially now becoming more important within the small business and the medium business area, is ethical investment. With the rise of ESG, the ability for the financial markets to measure the impact of social responsibility as a risk analysis. No one wants to invest in a business that has the potential to damage the environment or to mistreat its workforce, or so and so. And we are being so much more scrutinized. And back to that recruitment thing, you know, it's shown more and more that students are actively scrutinizing an organization's website before accepting a job. So I think we're beginning to see a gap in talent, and especially within the legal and financial sectors. So, and then of course, the other thing is about the reputational thing, about marketing and management, word of mouth and referral, about loyalty and advocacy, and creating, you know, that sense of trust and authenticity for all the stakeholders. So I think these are becoming increasingly important drivers for small to medium-sized businesses to deliver a truly holistic sustainability approach to their business model. And if they're not going to start doing this now, I think social responsibility, you know, are the early indicators of a successful business going forward. And I really do believe that if organizations don't start seriously thinking about how they integrate social responsibility within their organization, they may struggle to remain in business in the coming years. That's how big I think this is.
Thank you so much, Richard. And actually, what you're mentioning ties really well with what we're going to ask Ramona as well. And in the meantime, I can see in the chat that someone has challenged you to, the next time you're caught on mute, it will mean a donation to Linden Gate. So that is a good challenge to take. But what I was saying is the investors part is really important. The fact that there is external validation is not just coming from the inside. There is also external validation from the investor community saying, actually, this is something that matters. And that's what I would like to ask you, Ramona. Why do you think that investors invest in purpose-driven businesses? What is the competitive advantage that these companies have?
Thanks very much for the question. And Richard, thanks for why this is the new normal. I'm going to be very specific and talk about one particular part of the investment land. Enterprises.
Ramona, do you want to try and switch your video off? Because we can't hear you really well.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Possibly.
Can you hear me now? I'll try this again. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, possibly. Let's try. Okay, that's fine. Technical issues are perfect. What we'll do is we'll go back. Yeah, I think she's jumped off the call. What we'll do is we'll go back to the investors question in a second. In the meantime, let's start to dive into what sustainability actually looks like within a company. What we're going to see now is both an experience and perspective from a large corporation point of view, from two large corporations point of view, and also a smaller reality. And it's really a way of, Ramona is back. It's really a way of trying to understand how we can learn from each other and what others are doing as well. So what I would like to ask you, Kirsty, is we know that sustainability, as Richard mentioned, can bring tangible benefits to the business, right, of any size. So when we want to look at what sustainability actually looks like, what does sustainability mean to you from your own perspective, and how do you implement it within your reality at FTI Consulting?
Thanks, Alice. It's such a big question, isn't it? But I totally agree with Richard. I mean, we see it in terms of almost 4 different pillars. You know, the human, the environmental, the economic, and the social as well. So the way I've seen it change, to be honest, since I joined FTI Consulting 5 years ago, was that corporate citizenship was very much a kind of sideline activity. There was a bit of charity fundraising, people were doing a bit of volunteering. And I think what's really accelerated in the last 5 years is that corporate citizenship program alongside our diversity, inclusion and belonging. So it's I think what's really interesting is that it's become a lot more core to the values of the company. So I think for us, what we noticed, and Richard alluded to, is that nearly every millennial and actually Generation Z now are asking us, the number one question asked is how can they get involved in giving back? And that was, you know, from our recruitment team, such incredible feedback. And at the same time, questions from our clients have tripled in terms of what are we doing in terms of ESG? How are we giving back? So I think it's been those external pressures in terms of new talent and our clients, but also internally and staff retention and you know, people internally wanting to get involved. And we now have a network of 95 corporate citizenship champions. And when I started, that was probably about 10. But it just shows really how much it's grown. But very briefly, what we have done is really try to look at the values of the company. So we're a consultancy firm, and our strapline is experts with impact. And we've created a corporate citizenship program, which is about empowering our experts to make their own impact. And the way that we facilitate them to do that is through 3 ways, really. So it's volunteering hours, it's pro bono hours, because I think that's the best way our consultants can give back through professional services, and lastly, match funding, giving match funding to the charities of their choice. So I think this is quite a typical corporate citizenship program. But what we have tried to do is align this with the Sustainable Development Goals. So it felt very it felt very disconnected. Everybody was doing completely different things, and it felt like we needed to bring this together and create something stronger for when people say, what do you want me to do? We have something that we say, look, actually, you know, we're experts with impact, but we want you to focus on the next generation, young people, the skills gap, social mobility, and marginalized communities. So the process that we got to that through was actually through your help, Alice, to be honest, and looking at doing a survey. So we surveyed our stakeholders, our internal staff, our clients, our suppliers, and we got them to think about what values do they align with FTI Consulting as a brand. And they came back with, you know, I guess it was 4 sustainable development goals in quality education, decent work and economic growth, climate change, and gender equality and reduced inequalities, which were kind of the key themes coming out. And then we've based really our main programs around those themes. So one example is our quality education theme has led to our experts in schools program growth. So, you know, how we plug the gap in schools with topics that teachers find it hard to understand. And so, for example, you know, around the economic, following the economic crisis, we did a big piece of work on what does, boom, bust and crunch, what does that cycle actually mean to young people? And then following Brexit, we did a big experts in schools program on understanding Brexit and what were the issues involved in that. And more recently, we've done COVID and the economy. So we look at issues that schools are really struggling with, and then we use the expertise within our consultancy firm to support educational establishments with those themes that they're finding it difficult to teach themselves. So that program is our kind of now our key program, aligned with Sustainable Development Goal 4, that we're really expanding. So I hope that's quite a helpful summary.
Thank you, Kirsty. That's great, and it's really interesting to see what you were saying about the fact that the pressure was coming both from the inside, so younger employees wanting to give back and do something, but also from the outside, so your clients. And it's nice to see how you've tied that up by eventually involving all the stakeholders in the decision-making process and asking them, okay, we're ready for this. Where would you like to go together? And it's great, really. And on that point, actually, let me just check if Ramona is
I'm back. I hope you can hear me.
Back. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you clearly now. That's
excellent.
That's great.
Thank you. I could hear fine until the moment I started speaking, which is a Zoom classic.
It's perfect. I mean, it's what makes it real and better. So
yes.
just to pick up the question for everyone as well. We're looking at how stakeholders are putting pressure on businesses to change and really look at sustainability as something crucial to their prosperity. And obviously, one key group of stakeholders are the investors, who also become shareholders eventually. So the question to Ramona is, why do investors invest in purpose-driven companies? What is the competitive advantage that these businesses have?
Thanks very much for the question again, Alice. As I was starting to say, I actually focus on a very specific set of enterprises. So I'm also going to speak about a very specific set of investors. We read mostly in the financial press or in the general press about two kinds of enterprises and investors. We read a lot about disruptors that are funded by venture capital, and we read a lot about the basic retail investor environment, which is people like you and me putting money into things like pensions and investments that are then invested typically into listed companies. But I'm actually going to talk about a third and very important, and to my mind, understood piece of the puzzle, which is out there in the world, the basic needs in the world, such as energy, water and sanitation, education, there's been a financial system behind those for many years that has effectively failed to deliver any of these things consistently. And I'm sure it's not news that with COVID, a lot of things have actually gone backwards for what progress has been made. But the good news is that there's a whole set of amazing entrepreneurs, social and environmental value creating, innovative entrepreneurs, who often have a very, very good sense of both the systems change and also the last mile or inclusive business models that are required to deliver these things around the world. Up to now, the challenge has been is that they found it very difficult to get investors. Why? Because they're operating in markets where typically a lot of the money in the global north does not flow. Second, the venture capital model is not particularly well suited, even though the size of the opportunities is very high. These opportunities often take a long time to figure out. There needs to be regulatory change. The business models may be challenging or for a period of time require subsidies. So it's not a VC case. And the third reason is that most of the public money, which has really been the way to create new markets in things like renewable energy technologies, has been going toward much larger enterprises in things like infrastructure, in public-private partnerships, and in things like creating wind farms or solar farms. Now, those things may be helpful for energy generation, and by some estimates, about 70% of the money available goes into renewable energy generation, but it does nothing for purpose-driven entrepreneurs who are trying to solve education or healthcare or any one of the many, many other SDGs that require things to be done at both a local, regional, and global scale. The good news is that we're starting to see much, much more recognition of the value that these entrepreneurs create. And the first steps, which is very much what my firm is engaged with, to try and create a system of incentives that work a little bit like carbon credits. Carbon credits came about and are being used increasingly to price in what's known as effectively to account for either a negative or positive externality that typically wouldn't turn up in an investment case. But we can do exactly the same thing on the social side. We can begin to value, for example, the lifetime value that is created by someone getting a very, very high quality vocational or skills education. We can begin to value gender inclusivity. We can begin to value access to energy for the first time. And we can actually start to put numerical value on that then gives public funders a way of investing. And as soon as they start to invest, people also start to realize these are great businesses that have been de-risked by public money, so why not come in and invest alongside? We have a very long way to go. All of sub-Saharan Africa only attracts about 3% of the world's venture capital, so there's plenty of space to play. But I see a lot of encouraging innovation. I think the other thing to mention is purpose entrepreneurs in general tend to work harder with less investment, are more patient, have much higher employee retention, to the point that Richard and others have made earlier, and are basically a better bet. So if one is looking for both risk and impact capital, the purpose entrepreneur would be my bet for the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Ramona. That's great. And it's good to see how different perspectives and different backgrounds actually keep going to the same kind of point, which is there are benefits and there is a value in looking at these issues from multiple angles. So wanted to focus on the people side of sustainability for a little longer. I would like to ask Al. We've been talking about value and the value that sustainability and social responsibility can bring to the business, but also the pressure that there is in moving in this direction. And what I'd like to ask you is, what value can caring about people, both in the workplace, so your own staff, but also in the community, bring to the business in a very, very tangible way, in your experience as well?
Sure, yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, my focus is about enabling employees to volunteer their time. We give our employees 56 hours a year to volunteer on company time. And so it's a huge program, and we're always looking at how we can use that time to drive the most impact externally, but also to ensure that people are developing internally, because, you know, I'm a big believer things don't need to be altruistic to be good. I think, you know, there's inherent value add to both sides of the party. And to do that, so I look at, you know, we look at what society needs and how we can enable volunteers to fill those gaps through their own experiences. So much like some of the other folks said, including Kirsty, about, you know, the skilled volunteering and really looking to yourself at what we've got in-house and how society could use that externally. But specifically thinking about caring, and I went down a wormhole with this. I really enjoyed it. So when I was thinking about what caring in the sustainability space looks like, I was thinking that, you know, for me, it really means seeing the inherent value and potential of everyone, and internally and externally. I think it's enabling all people to be successful within their own context and whilst being their authentic selves. And I think, you know, that everything kind of boiled down to that as I was thinking about this. And I think this definition is completely applicable internally and externally within the business. For example, a society that is enabled to be successful, where voices are heard and people are seen, you know, where all potential is realized, you know, that can only be good for the businesses within that society. But equally, you know, any business where the employees are successful, where they're enabled, where they're heard, you know, and where their differences are celebrated, can only be good for society. So I feel like it's two sides of the same coin. And I've really got sort of caught up on the importance of semantics when thinking about this. And obviously, as CSR professionals, often we need to communicate this into a business and really help people understand that this is not just a fluffy nice to have. This is where it's really at, you know, to Richard's point. And so, you know, I think that in CSR, most of the relationships and conversations we have, there's like an inherent focus on otherness. You know, the grantee, the grantor, the service provider, service user, you know, the volunteer and the recipient is very us and them. And I think actually, there's an argument that CSR could be seen, the business function of responding to the needs of another, namely society. So, this happens in business as well. We have the employee, the employer, the leader, follower, manager, team member. So, all of this otherness, I think both internally and externally, it sort of really reduces the amount of care for the individual, care for people, puts barriers up, and it reduces the amount of transformational power of business. So I think for me, the most important thing about caring for people is the concept of we, we as partnership, we as a shared responsibility, but also shared value add. It's shared, sharing the results of that sort of collaboration. We is when everyone belongs, and then we is something that we all care for. So when you think about what the value of caring for people is to business, whether it's philanthropy or equality, if it's diversity, social impact, what have you, including the environment, I guess, as well, the value to business of caring and the value of caring about business are the same thing. And essentially it comes back to this focus on society is society. There is no business in society, it's all one. And then I guess potentially think about how to operationalize this. The biggest tip I would give anyone trying to incorporate these sort of concepts we're going to be talking about today is ask. You can see today we have a network around us of people that care and will happily give time. I spend a lot of my time talking to other CSR professionals, looking at what they're trying to do, talking to nonprofits about how to reach people, asking educators, what do you need? What can we offer you? But equally, internally, looking at your employees and asking them what they can do, of course, but also asking them what they need and what they care about. And looking to see what society can offer them. As I say, it doesn't need to be altruistic to be good. It just needs to be good.
Wow, thank you. Thanks, Al. That was very, very profound. And I like how you've mentioned that caring for business and caring for people are the same thing, and that by caring, businesses are enabling a society and are creating a society in which they can thrive. So it's not something, like Richard was saying, it's not a nice to have, it's something that actually is enabling business to, to operate at their maximum potential and to create a society in which everyone can thrive, really. And speaking about everyone thriving, I would like to throw another very important element into the mix, which is, of course, we need to care for people, and caring for people is essential. But in caring for people, we also must care for the environment and the planet that is enabling us to be and do what we do every day. And so what I'd like to ask you, Roy, is what is the role of environmental sustainability in shaping your business roadmap to prosperity? How does environmental sustainability enables prosperity within the business?
Okay, thanks, Alice. So to begin with, environmental sustainability is extremely important to us. I know that you would expect me to say that. But there are definitely two angles to this question. So what we do as a business to reduce our impact on the environment, and what we do to help our clients reduce theirs. So there are two things, and I'll focus on what we do first, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we do to help our clients. So we're a certified B Corp. I'm assuming that some of you might know what that means, but if you don't, it essentially means that we've gone through a certification process that means that we meet the highest standards of social and environmental performance, transparency, and accountability. The commitment that we made to certify and subsequently certifying included updating our articles of association to include mission-aligned language. Environmental sustainability features as a kind of prominent agenda item within our monthly board meetings, and so it's pretty high up on the agenda for us. In addition to that, and actually, as part of that commitment, we recently joined more than 1,000 businesses around the world to reduce our carbon emissions in line with climate science through working with the Science Based Targets Initiative. Our target specifically is that we're committed to reducing our absolute scope 1 and 2 GHG emissions by 50% by 2025 from a 2018 base year. And we've also committed to measuring and reducing our scope 3 emissions, which exclude offsetting. To make things more difficult for ourselves, and actually as part of this, of our commitment to B Corp, we have created a stretch target to achieve net zero emissions by 2030. And we've done that through joining something that's called Race to Net Zero, Race to Zero, and is, I think, kind of facilitated through an organization or a group of B Corps called the B Corp Climate Collective. And these are B Corps that are working together to take action on the climate emergency. As part of our commitment to net zero, we've spent a lot of time measuring our greenhouse gas emissions, including our scope 3 emissions. So we've kind of gone beyond scope 1 and 2 and looking at things like employee commuting, which now includes home working emissions, purchased goods and services, and a few others that we deemed material to our business. So we did that, and we've also created a roadmap to net zero, which contains our plans to decarbonize our business and our value chain. This is all quite a lot, considering we're pretty small, but we like to practice what we preach, and this is something that we help our clients with as well. So moving on to that, what we do to help our clients reduce their impact. Well, we provide a multitude of services to them that enable them to embed environmental sustainability into their strategy or their business strategy, which subsequently helps them reduce their impact on the environment and leads to a reduction in consumption mainly and therefore carbon emissions. That element contributes massively or enormously to our the customer impact score within the B impact assessment. So that's quite key to that. In terms of adding value, and I think that was the second part of your question. So we are a professional services business. Therefore, the majority of the business benefits come from the social side of our sustainability strategy. And I know that's not what you want me to talk about, so I'll leave that to the experts. But the social side of our sustainability strategy is mainly focused on supporting the UN Sustainable Development Goal 8, which is decent work and economic growth. And we do find it quite difficult to quantify the value that a focus on social sustainability has. So that's maybe something that I can learn from today. You know, my area of expertise is in environmental sustainability and not that side. So, but yeah, how does a focus on environmental sustainability add value to our business? And I guess that depends on what we mean by value. If we're referring to adding value through reducing operational costs, we have implemented various environmental initiatives and policies that focus on reducing our costs. And we've done that through things like reducing our energy consumption through the installation of LEDs in our offices and creating energy efficiency communications and guidance for staff, both in the offices and working from home. We have encouraged people to reduce business and non-essential travel through using Teams. And I think that COVID has really forced us to do that. So we haven't really had to sell that to people. They haven't had no choice, but we do have a policy that encourages it. So hopefully people will listen if we ever get back to some form of normality. And I suppose in addition to that, it's, encouraging people to use lower emitting modes of travel. If we're referring to adding value through reducing our impact on the environment, which is obviously for us equally as important as reducing our costs, and in fact probably more important, we have done things like eliminating, or we're looking at eliminating the use of company-owned vehicles and ensuring that we purchase electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles going forward. Continuing to procure renewable electricity for our operations, implementing low greenhouse gas procurement or purchasing policies. I've got a really long list here, I'm looking at the time, and we're probably running out. But essentially, we're doing a huge amount in that area to reduce our impact on the environment, which is obviously as important to us as reducing costs. So I'll leave it at that because I think I've taken up more than 5 minutes.
Thanks, Roy. That was actually great and very, very informing for anyone that would like to start getting some ideas around activities that can be done in this direction. I love that you touch on the social side again, and on the reporting especially, because it's actually going to be the focus of the last part before we go into questions. What I'm going to do now, before I hand it to Natalie, I'm going to launch a poll. It's a very simple poll. I'm going to leave it on for a minute so that you can all respond to it. And it's a poll around impact. I invite the guests to also take part in the poll if they would like. And it's asking, as you can see, whether you're measuring impact in your organization, and if so, if you are leveraging the UN Sustainable Development Goals to do that. So I'm just going to give you a minute to respond. Okay. Okay, so the 2 questions that were in the poll are, do you currently measure your impact? And the second one is, if so, do you use the UN Sustainable Development Goals? A few responses are still coming through, but I think we've got most of it. So what I'd like to do now is, Natalie, I would like for you to look at these results, and while kind of discussing the results and also looking at how different businesses and organizations are working towards the goal, what I would like to ask you is, how do we know that our efforts are actually making a difference? How do we know what is the impact that we are making through our sustainability activities?
Yeah, thanks, Alice. Are you able to share the results? I can't see them.
Oh, okay. I thought they were visible. Okay, I will share it. So we've got, in terms of, do you currently measure your impact? We have 34% of the audience saying yes, and another 34 saying kind of, and 21 saying not yet, but I'd like to. 10% don't know.
Okay.
In terms of using the SDGs to measure impact, we have 38% saying yes, 28 saying kind of, and 21, so very similar, 21 saying not yet, but I'd like to. 10% says don't know, and only 3% says no, I'm not planning to.
Okay, great, thank you. And thanks everyone for participating. It's really great to get a sense of where people are in the room. And I'm actually I'm kind of pleasantly surprised and impressed that so many people already are measuring their impact. Oh, I see them now.
Yes, I've shared it now because I've ended.
But I'm really not surprised by the kind ofs and the not yets, but I'd like to. And I think this sort of reflects a level of uncertainty and maybe a bit of trepidation around impact measurement. And I don't know what the feeling is in the room, but I definitely have found that quite an intimidating name and an intimidating field. Where the other things that we measure in business, it's really clear what we're measuring. There's lots of numbers involved. People often make the analogy with accounting, where there's really commonly accepted ways of measuring how we're doing. And when it comes to impact, it can be really overwhelming, and there's not necessarily a commonly accepted way to measure impact. It can be really difficult to know where to get started. So if any of you are in that space right now, you're definitely not alone. And I think one thing that's really interesting, especially hearing from all the other speakers, is that the conversation about business impact and what it means for what we should be measuring has moved on so much in the last few years. Now, I think that it wasn't so long ago that people sort of saw corporates' efforts in this space to be fluffy, nice to have things, as Alastair mentioned. And you'd have, at the other end of the scale, you'd have people asking, well, what does it mean for profit? How is it profitable? And it felt like these were two opposing things that weren't compatible with each other. And I feel like the conversations that we're having now are much more in the middle of this spectrum, and we're much closer to finding a middle ground. And there's been a lot of talk today about what social value means, and I think a lot more acceptance that there's value in doing things that are good for us socially and good for the environment. And we don't necessarily have to directly connect that to profit the whole time. We can accept that there are good things to do and they help our business in other ways. So what this does is it really frees us up more in terms of thinking about what do we measure. But it also maybe complicates that question a bit more, because if we're not measuring profitability, what are we measuring? And I think, you know, Roy mentioned setting a net zero target. That's a great example of where you've got a clear goal, you've probably got a starting point that you can measure, and you know what you're working towards. When we think about social impact, though, a lot of social impacts are a lot more subjective than that. How can we really understand whether we've improved somebody's quality of life? And one thing I'll say is I really don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach. All of your organisations are unique, and the impact you're able to have is unique. You've talked about your employees, like you sort of looking at the expertise you have internally and the impact you can make, and that's different for every organisation. So your impact measurement will be in relation to what's the impact potential of your organisation, and there is no one size fits all for that. But what there are is some really great tools and frameworks and organisations out there that can help get started and to make sense of all of those different things. So we've already talked about the Sustainable Development Goals, and I saw that Serena's posted a link in the chat, and that's their website is really useful for sort of going through in a logical order and sort of sensing what are some of the impacts you could be having, and what are some of the things that other people are measuring, and how could you start measuring that. I want to mention two more initiatives that I would highly recommend you take a look at if you can. One is the Impact Management Project, which is a collaboration of over 2,000 organisations all over the world who've been working together to really standardise how organisations approach impact management. And so it's not a framework, it's not a step-by-step, this is what you should do. They call it norms, and it's 5 areas which you should think about. And if all organisations are thinking about those 5 areas, we'll get much closer to a common way of reporting on our impact. And I've used the word impact management there, and I should mention that when I think about impact, I very much advocate for an impact management approach rather than an impact measurement approach. The difference between those two things is that impact measurement is about collecting data, seeing where you are, and impact management takes that further and says, what is the reason for collecting this data? What do we need to know? And how can we use this data to make decisions so that we are constantly improving our impact? And so the idea is it's much less about we must prove our impact, we must have a number that tells everybody how well we're doing, and much more about how well are we doing right now, and what can we do to do even better? What might we change? And that there's been a real shift in the impact measurement world towards that approach and that mindset and that way of thinking about things. Just one more point that I wanted to mention before I sum up is around the other thing that there is out there is some really great principles around how we should measure social value. Social Value International have 7 principles on their website, and I'm just going to pick out the first one, which is all about putting the people who are affected by your impact at the centre of your measurement and management. So you obviously have goals and things you want to achieve as a business, but our biggest accountability is towards the people or the places whose lives are being impacted by what we do. And so putting them at the centre will give us a much more meaningful understanding of what that impact is. And I think as people who work in this space, sort of even people who work in this space, this is challenging to understand. So for people who don't work in this space, they're that one step removed from understanding why impact measurement might be different to other types of measurement within their business. And there's a real role that we can play in helping them to understand why we're taking a certain approach to things, why it's important to put our stakeholders at the centre of what we're measuring, and why it might be difficult to give them a number for social impact. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalie. That was great. I really like two main points that I take from this are the fact that there is no one size fits all when it comes to impact, and that, you know, going back to the idea of what Rachel was talking about, that traditionally sustainability was associated with big corporations only, and now it has to become a more inclusive. The C of corporate social responsibility has to become more inclusive to allow other kind of organizations and also sizes of business to join the conversation and make a difference. And also the second point from what you were saying around the importance of engaging stakeholders and looking at how stakeholders are being affected by your business, how you can involve them in the process. So we have some. I would like to open it up to the room now to see if if anyone has questions. I know there are some questions on the chat which I'm going to read. Okay, let's see. So we have a question from Paul, I think is the first one in the chat, who's asking, what would Richard and Roy say are the three main differences in their businesses? Okay, that's an interesting question. I'd say they're very different businesses, but I leave it to them to respond.
Who would you like to answer first? I guess from my perspective, this is the first time that we've met. So it's difficult for me to say what the difference between our businesses are. But as I said at the beginning, we're an energy and sustainability consultancy, a professional services firm, and so I'm not going to kind of bore people with the detail of what we do specifically, but there is an element or an arm of our services that are focused on helping clients do a lot of what I was talking about. You know, I said that we like to practice what we preach. So, creating a net zero or carbon strategy, and then collecting the data that's needed, setting targets, managing that data and reporting, and then creating kind of insights from that data, and then a plan to decarbonize the business. So that's essentially what we do in a nutshell.
Roy, sorry to interrupt. Since you're there, because there is a couple of questions directly for you, so maybe you want to touch on them both. So one is asking, is your organization mostly working alone in the B Corp roadmap to net zero, or are you collaborating as well with other B Corps who join this climate initiative? And then the other question is if you could give insight into how you've mapped out your roadmap to net zero, and if there are any specific resources to help with this, or if you would suggest partnering with a specialist consultant. Okay.
So to begin with, in relation to the Climate Collective, which I think that the person who asked the question was referring to, there is, we are working, I suppose, alongside other B Corps in that we share information and resources. We not so long ago had a roundtable discussion like this, talking about carbon emissions and offsetting emissions using a certain methodology. So yeah, we do collaborate, but most of what we've done is using our kind of in-house expertise and experience. Like I said, this is something that we do for our clients, and therefore we're pretty well equipped to do it for ourselves. Which I suppose brings me to the next question, which is around, sorry, I'm just reading it. So can I give insight into how we've mapped? Yeah, so again, because this is what we do, we knew how to create this roadmap. And there are lots of resources out there, a lot with regards to net zero. There are different organizations like the Carbon Trust or the Science Based Targets Initiative that provide information on net zero and what companies should or shouldn't be doing. There are kind of sector specific guidance or guidelines. In terms of would I suggest partnering? I suppose it depends on how well you're doing with regards to doing this yourself. If you're struggling, maybe I would probably start by looking at some of these resources. Again, it depends on the size of the business as well, and how much resource you have internally to help with this sort of stuff.
What we'll do, thank you, Roy, what we'll do is actually put together all of the resources that have been mentioned by the guest and are being shared on the chat as well, and then share it with all of you, whether it's social value, environmental impact, measurement and management of impact frameworks, etc., so that you'll all have it in one place. So there is another question from Sylvia, who's asking, how do you choose the most appropriate framework to measure both our social and environmental impacts? Who would like to go for that one? Probably it's a Natalie's question.
Yeah, I can pick that up, and I've just dropped a note in the chat as well. What I would recommend starting with thinking about what are the main impacts that you think your business has. There'll be a different approach to measuring each of those. The impact management framework, the 5 norms, sets out quite a useful way to systematically think through what is the impact you have, who are the people who experience it, how much impact do they experience, what's your contribution, and what are the risks. And if you can think through those 5 things in relation to your main areas of impact, what you'll find is it opens up much more questions than you have answers to, and that will set you off on a process of what are the questions we need to answer, which will help you find suitable tools and approaches for that.
Thanks, Natalie. There's another question from Francesco, who's asking, how can a small or medium-sized business start to think about sustainability in the right way? Richard, do you wanna go for this?
Well, yeah, thank you. I mean, and just to pick up on a few of the comments earlier, especially with regards to what Roy's doing. I mean, the accreditation model is a way to start your social responsibility journey. So it's a really great framework for a small business to identify what it's currently doing and then look at the gap analysis and see where it's going. But more importantly, it's about evidencing the impact that you're doing. It's not about box ticking. It's about showing that you are delivering what you're doing. And an organization like Roy's, in terms of helping an organization to optimize on energy and zero carbon agenda, it's really important to work with third parties to measure impact and then use that as a way to evidence that you are doing what you'll say you're doing. Otherwise, it can be seen as kind of being an empty gesture. So I think it's really important to find a framework in which you can look at what you're doing currently, where you can support that with evidence that you are doing those things, whether it's volunteering, whether it's diversity policies, whether it's in terms of energy, reducing your energy, or in waste management, and then communicating that, measuring it, and communicating the impact, and keeping that process going forward. So I think from the point of view of a small business, the accreditation model is an eloquent way of looking at how you can identify your sustainability agenda and deliver a process that will take you forward year after year.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you to everyone for taking part and participating in this incredible discussion. I just wanted to let you know that we have a cool surprise for everyone that has attended. We'll be sharing a questionnaire, SDG focused questionnaire, with the audience. It's a couple of questions. Once you've submitted your questionnaire, we'll basically send you some tailored tips on how you can really align your sustainability to the SDGs and take your sustainability to the next level. So it's something that we would like to start the conversation around the SDGs, so that more and more businesses can begin to make an impact. I would like to thank you all for being here. I might be biased, and I know we're out of time, but I would like to say that it's very, very powerful to see all of you here in one space, sharing ideas and learning from each other, because I think probably I would say that sustainability people today have one of the most tough job there is in today's society, which is basically making sure that we're all still here, able to thrive, as Al was saying, in 50 years down the line. So it's not an easy job, and no pressure at all on anyone, but do keep up the great work, and thank you so much for taking part. It's been incredible, and thank you to all the guests for being here and sharing their experience. Thank you, guys. Bye. Bye bye. Have a good day.
Bye bye.
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 Thanks, Alice. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.